A helpful way to me, once again, to look at this is moving away from religion as I'm right and you're wrong, correct beliefs, or religion as a place where I go to have my right beliefs upheld. So religion moving a little bit away from that, or a lot away from that, into religion as an attitude toward life that takes a careful look at life and then sees the places where we can reconnect to the deeper parts of ourselves and to each other.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain: to find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of More Than One Way podcast. I'm Whitney Ross, and with me is my good friend Thom Rasnick.
Hey, Whitney.
Hey, Thom, how are you?
Good. I'm doing pretty good. I'm just still thinking about the little audio video clip that somebody sent in just from, I think it was last week.
Yeah.
And it got at something that I hope we can get into and talk about. It got at religion and why it is that people use religion as a weapon. And so I'm not going to name names because I want to do that. I just want to say what happened and then you decide for yourself.
Sure.
Right. So this person was speaking before Congress, and she said just what I said. Why is it that one part of our body, whenever they want to use religion or cry religious freedom, it's always in the name of bigotry or exclusion, right? And so she talked about that some, and I'm not going to do her whole spiel, but essentially she said, what I don't understand is your religion is all about how do we separate and exclude. She said, my religion is all about love and inclusion. And she said, I was taught in my religion that to see all people as sacred. And so that we try the best that we can to not exclude anybody. Mm-hmm. And I thought, there it is right there, even in our political arena. Division, religion used as a way to try to divide, and people kind of choosing sides and saying my way's right and your way's wrong, and back and forth it goes.
Yeah.
And that could be a very long, sad story of the religious world.
Yeah, a lot of tension there just with the use of the word religion.
Yeah. Just using the word and what it's all about. And just look at history, and there's just been fight after fight after fight, and continues to be, over using religion as some form of I have the right belief. And my belief is right, and your belief is wrong, and we're going to fight it out. Sometimes, if it's a debate, that's fine. But then sometimes the debate falls into even more separation, and then eventually can lead to violence if we once again look at the history of religion in the world. When religion gets all about belief, generally speaking, we start to separate and fight.
So what is, if it's not all about belief, what are other things that it's about?
Well, like so much that we talk about here, there's just more than one way to use and understand religion, right? Religions that stay up, and I'll get to that,
okay.
But religions that stay up in the head and are all about trying to have the right answer and correct belief, like I said, have led to atrocities, like within any indigenous people that you can see. The stronger, really, country where this particular religion is king. Goes into a place and says, either you do it our way or we're gonna make you do it our way.
Yeah.
We're gonna hurt you because our religion is better than your religion. And then that has led to all these different churches and mosques and synagogues, all which can be wonderful places, great places, for me anyway, if they help get people away from seeing religion only as right belief. Because at their worst, churches and synagogues and mosques can be places where my belief and only my belief is fostered, and then we fight against everybody else. Mm-hmm. But at the best, I think churches can be places where people can have a religious attitude fostered. And now I'm getting at answering your question, okay? Yeah. That another way to see religion isn't centered on belief, but it's centered on an attitude toward life. Okay, and the reason I say that is that goes back into the original definitions of the word. If we're going to look at the word religion as it was spelled out in Latin, okay, and then here's a little known fact. I bet you don't know this, and so at your next little party, you can throw this out. And people will go, oh my,
Latin word
let's
facts.
talk about politics and religion, please. and so in the Latin, there's two different spellings of the word religion. And one is R-E-L-I-G-A-R-E. Okay, and it's rogere, and it means to reconnect, like ligaments. Our word ligament comes from that. Okay, so it's like connecting like a ligament.
Okay.
So it's a connecting or reconnecting to our deeper part of ourselves and to the divine as we understand the divine.
Okay.
Okay? So it's that. And then the other is R-E-L-I-G-E-R, not G-A-R, but G-E-R-E. And that means to take into careful account, to look at carefully, to ponder, in a sense, in a careful way. So another way to get at that word is the opposite of it is neglect.
Okay.
So to not have a religious attitude is to have a neglectful attitude toward life, or a careless attitude.
And back to your first definition as well, it'd be one of maybe division versus connection.
It would be about division.
Right.
It would be about, rather than what connects us, it would be about what separates us. And it's usually, once again, the thing that usually separates us is what we believe and being right.
Yeah.
And how important that is. Right? And so I think the politicians were trying to get, when you're in that world, sure, eventually you're going to have to take a vote on stuff. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to say, I support this, and that means I don't support that. But there is a way to do that. There is a way to do that with a religious attitude. And it would be, on the one hand, recognizing that the person is more than their beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Seeing the person as a human being and saying, okay, this is what you believe now, but maybe in time as we...
Yeah. Beliefs change.
They shift.
Yeah.
Right? So a helpful way to me, once again, to look at this is moving away from religion as, I'm going to keep saying this, I'm right and you're wrong, correct beliefs, or religion as a place where I go to have my right beliefs enhanced, or upheld. Mm-hmm. All right? So religion moving a little bit away from that, or a lot away from that, into religion as an attitude toward life. So a religious attitude toward life that takes a careful look at life and then sees the places where we can reconnect to the deeper parts of ourselves and to each other.
Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah. Okay. So I saw this story, and then I hope that my story spurs a story in you, and then we can see where this goes, because now we need to see it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I was flipping through Instagram, and I came across a coach from Army, from the West Point.
Okay.
He was the lacrosse coach, and he was leading a camp for boys that were 9 to 11 years old, right? So, and they're all sitting there, and he's doing the obligatory speech that the leader of camps like that do.
Yeah.
And he goes, so what's your life all about right now? What's the most important thing? not to 9 through 11 year old boys. And he goes, it's being a tough guy, right? It's being a tough guy. That's the most important thing, being tough. And the kids were just kind of, yeah, and he just went on and he goes, well, what does that look like? What does being a tough guy look like? And he said, well, I'll tell you what it looks like. He said, so say you're in your school cafeteria and you walk in and you're looking all across the room, you're scanning it and you're watching what's going on, and you see one person sitting by himself who's different than you are, who might not walk the same way as you, who might not know how to play lacrosse, but he's sitting all alone. Mm-hmm. Being tough is going over and asking that kid if he wants to join your group.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the reconnection. There's that, right? So a religious attitude toward life is seeing that word tough in another way. And he said, it's easy to make fun of people. It's easy to put people down. It's easy to exclude people.
Yeah.
It takes a tough person to say, no, I'm going to overcome whatever it is that's separating us and invite this person in. So that's an example of a religious attitude toward life.
Wow, that's a great story. I mean, you think about something that can be communicated even to someone that young.
Yeah.
In such a clear way as another way to think about being tough.
Right.
What that looks like.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Once again, so it's like seeing religion in a different way is the same thing as this guy saying seeing toughness in a different way. Because when we start using religion as something like a weapon, then for me we've lost the original meaning of what it's all about, of what it was intended to be. And it probably has something to do with we're afraid, or we are angry, or we're frustrated with life. And so we start grabbing at things, and religion becomes a perfect thing to become this weapon.
That reminds me, I don't know if you've seen, there's a documentary that's out now called The Cave of Adullam. And it's about a man named Jason Wilson, and he's in Detroit, and he teaches martial arts. And much in the way the coach in your story is kind of communicating things in a different way, he really, he puts his students in uncomfortable situations to teach them a different way how to deal with their emotions. And so the Cave of Adullam is a biblical reference of where David took refuge from Saul.
Oh, yeah.
In the cave near the town of Adullam.
Yeah.
And so he'll have his students there, and they'll be on the mat and they'll be sparring, and the kid will start to break down, and he'll hold the kid up really close, just right to his face, very strong, and he'll ask him, why are you crying? And the kid will say, well, I'm nervous. And he'll continue to say, well, why are you nervous? He's like, well, I'm scared. It's like, well, why are you scared? He's like, because I'm going to mess up. I can't do this. And he's like, what do we do when we can't do something? And he just holds the kid there and says, when we can't do something, we ask for help. And he looks around and says, the people on this mat are your help. So I want you to turn to them and ask for their help. So he turns to them and asks for their help, and they come together. And it's this idea of teaching them how to handle their emotions. And he talks about teaching them manhood in this different way, with the idea that how you handle your emotions is going to determine how you respond in situations that you can't control.
Yeah.
And it's if you haven't seen it, it's a great documentary, and really just another way of taking something. I mean, it's self-defense. You would think it might be very aggressive, and it's definitely strong.
Yeah.
But there's something different, something deeper at heart.
Yes, and that's a great example of what it would look like to have, once again, this religious attitude that I'm talking about. That I think the ancient people back in the day, that's why religion was created in the first place. So it's created partially as a response to life and to encounters with something greater, more, God, that within life, right? And so it starts with that. But part of it is trying to help us focus on living life, not just on what we believe. If our beliefs help us live well, great. Then that's part of the religious attitude. But if they become used as weapons,
Mm-hmm.
or used as a way to shore up my rightness and your wrongness, then that, once again, that's getting away from this. And then we have to start looking, well, where does this happen? And that's a great place. That's a great story about, okay, this is where it's happening. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in a church or a mosque or a synagogue.
Well, and you were talking earlier about, a group maybe that feels like they're right coming against another group of people, and they're there with the idea that our religion is right and your religion is wrong.
Yeah.
It's interesting that maybe they're even admitting that those people had a religion before they got there.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not like they were absent
Right.
of religion. That's something that people have, that groups of people have and form.
Yeah. Well, people who study this kind of stuff will look at human beings and say that, there's an innate need within human beings to connect with something greater than our own ego,
Mm-hmm.
to be in the presence of something more than simply our own individual self. This guy, Carl Jung, whose influences me, he's a Swiss psychologist that lived way back in the day. He calls it that each person has the religious function of the psyche. So meaning within ourselves, there's this religious need. And by religious, he means this. There's this need to pay attention to life so that we can see what's going on, to pay attention to ourselves, to see what's going on within ourselves, and to find those places that help us connect to these deeper parts of ourselves, these greater parts of ourselves, and the greater part of life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's saying, that there is a need in the human being to have that. Right? It's implanted. It's not something that we just simply willy-nilly create.
Right.
So we'll find it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And like I'm saying, is sometimes within that search, what we find is a belief that we're so certain of that it becomes a weapon. And I think that's what the woman in the political speech was trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We start to use religion as a weapon, I don't know, to make ourselves feel safe.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's throughout the history of the world when it's gone off the rails.
And that feels like a quick action versus that pause.
Yeah.
That taking time to really consider and think.
And look and reflect,
yeah.
and to be thoughtful about. When you hear that, wouldn't you think, and this is like a leading question, so I'm sorry about this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when you hear that, all the things we just said about taking a pause, look, carefully considering, wouldn't that be a great thing to add into life? A life that, well, at least from my perspective, the way I see the way we live this kind of life right now,
mm-hmm.
which is very fast-paced, very quick, trying to get a lot done in as short amount of time as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if that's the way we're going to live, periodically it's nice to have something to slow us down a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to get us pay attention.
Yeah.
And when we do that, there's religion. It doesn't have to be all this doctrine or dogma or right beliefs. They can help support that. All
mm-hmm.
that stuff can help support that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the thing. Right? And the thing about it is if we get stuck in the I'm right, you're wrong, right now, just think about religion. Just think
mm-hmm.
about churches and how many do you think there are within the context of life?
How many different churches?
Yeah, how many different, or how many different denominations, or how many different
goodness.
religions, or how many?
Yeah, hundreds probably.
No, within just the Christian religion, and this is just within the Christian religion, not taking into account other ones.
Sure.
In the United States, there's 33,000 different denominations. Different forms of people saying, no, this is the way to do it. This is the right belief.
Oh, my goodness.
We do it the right way. And all those things, once again, all those 33,000 things could be very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
If they're, well, for me anyway, if they're in that place of fostering this attitude toward life,
Mm-hmm.
toward yourself and toward life, and they become very, very, very unhelpful, if not destructive.
Yeah.
When
Like
it's
the opposite.
Yeah, when it's just, hey, let's rally around our beliefs and then go out and attack anybody who doesn't have the same one that we have, or exclude.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting because I think for someone who maybe doesn't have a formal connection to a place with their religion, a lot of times it can feel like just that word itself is such a turnoff.
Yeah.
You know, in the context of how it's represented today
Yes.
versus its true context.
Right.
It just seems like, don't even bring that up
Right.
because I don't have time for what that is to that person.
Yeah,
What
do you think that word conjures up in people when they hear it?
I think for a lot of people, it's what I'm against.
Yeah.
Is I'm against this or I don't do this versus what it's adding or opening or growing, you know.
Yeah.
It just seems to be a very closed kind of line drawing type of thing.
Yeah. And then we get to see, like within our opening, what we were talking about with the politicians, what life gets like.
Yeah.
Just camp after camp after camp, separation and more division.
Mm-hmm.
And almost finding it almost impossible to find what brings us together. Which religion could? Yeah, I mean, it's once again, I would say that for a huge portion of people, it is a negative, and that's part of what trying to get back to the roots of something could help with.
Well, and there are times it almost feels like a test. I mean, that the word itself is, I'm going to test whether you're in line with what I think, you know. I mean, it's just, I can't imagine that's productive, but.
Yeah, what does that do, right? What does that do to life?
Yeah.
And what does that do to us? Because we can do that, you know, we can do that to ourselves, right? So I had a friend who loves to garden,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she goes out in the garden, and all these things that I'm talking about with the initial word of the word religion,
Mm-hmm.
the initial definition of that word, come into play when she's in her garden. She's reconnected to life. She's doing something that really, really she has to pay close attention to. It opens her up to something bigger than herself, and it's just this massive religious experience. And she told that to somebody who is involved in a religion, and the person said, "Well, that's not valid."
Okay.
And what? You're right. What?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because our religion says wherever 2 or 3 are gathered. Okay, so there's this. Okay, that's the way it has to be. There's the religion. 2 or 3 are gathered, and that means 2 or 3 people who look just about the way I look, right? or I don't know. That's a bit mean.
Yeah.
You know, 2 or 3 have to be gathered, but they have to be human beings, right? And she thought about that for a while, and she thought, well, the truth is, I'm not alone when I'm in that garden. Because from this connecting part of religion,
Mm-hmm.
it's connecting her with other parts of herself, parts that she's sometimes not aware of when she's running around and doing the stuff that we all do.
Mm-hmm.
And it connects her to the plants and the vegetables and all the things that she's growing, because from her perspective, and I would share this perspective, they're just as alive as we are. So if you're going to have a religious attitude, it moves it from that's invalid because 2 or 3 are gathered together and that just means people,
Mm-hmm.
to no, 2 or 3 can mean a dog in me, or it can mean a tree in me, or it can mean my plants in me.
So that opens up
Right.
so many possibilities.
The difference between a hardcore understanding of religion and a religious attitude. A religious attitude to life is I look around, I pay attention, I take careful consideration, and I see in my garden life.
And then participating
and
in
then
that,
I participate
connecting to
in
it.
it.
Yeah.
And that's becomes, by any other name, some level of prayer. Okay?
Yeah.
And then the second part of the word religion, and I'm reconnected. I'm reconnected to a deeper part of myself. I'm reconnected to the earth. I'm reconnected to all that I'm around. Religion is at its worst the tighter, for me, the tighter it gets. I get that we have to form boundaries, and I think that's what sometimes people are doing by excluding.
Okay.
That's the extreme of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but boundaries are good. Sometimes we have to say, no, I can't do that. I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let this in. I understand that completely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the great spiritual masters come in and always say, yeah, but sometimes the boundaries get too tight. And we need to expand them a bit. So Jesus was all about that. I'll play the Jesus card here for a little, all right? Right?
Okay, yeah.
It's a big card.
It is.
It's the Ace of Hearts. and so Jesus would, oftentimes, one of the thing he got in the most trouble about throughout the different Gospels was doing stuff on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay? The Sabbath was a big religious obligation. First, it was supposed to be a religious gift. To say to people, your life doesn't have to be only about production. You're allowed to rest.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to find places where you can just wonder and be in awe and be in silence, or whatever it is that you do,
mm-hmm.
or work in your garden, okay? So it's supposed to be a gift. And it got turned into this collection of rules that became an obligation that almost became a punishment.
Mm.
You can do this, you can't do that. You can do
Right.
this, you can't do that. You can't do that, you can't do that. You can't do that, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay? And it became all about that. And that's the way it was within the day
Mm-hmm.
in religion. Okay?
Gotcha.
And Jesus comes in and heals somebody on the Sabbath, and they get on his case about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And he says, you're missing the Sabbath completely. The Sabbath is here to help foster a religious attitude toward yourself and toward life. And you've turned it into what? A rule-based obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And you've sucked all the life out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. That's what unfortunately can happen when everything is about I'm doing it right and I've got the right belief. Those people back in Jesus' day who held up the Sabbath that way
Mm-hmm.
were not bad people.
Yeah.
They thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah, they were protecting it.
That's right. They thought that this was what was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, as the great disruptor that he was, comes in and says, but you're missing.
Mm-hmm. He did that so often with so many things.
Times.
Yeah.
It just made people so mad.
Yeah.
Right? It made some people so mad, and it freed other people up.
Right.
So one of the things that I really hope people can take away from our talk in this is not that, first of all, is not that religion's bad, not saying that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But really trying to say, can we go back to the original definition in a kind of a nerdy etymological way and say what religion is really all about, at least from its inception, is taking that slow, careful look at life so that we're not leading a life of neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Slow, careful look, and find the things and the ways and like being in a garden that help you reconnect to that deeper part of yourself, to that greater part of life that we call God, and to hopefully all that's alive. And that religion is all about those things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really beautiful way to describe it for something that maybe has become sour just in our day-to-day, to really think of it in kind of it painting that type of picture.
Yeah.
That's a great way to wrap things up.
Well, thanks.
Thanks, Thom. We are so glad you're with us today, and hope that you'll send us your feedback and your questions as you have them. It was great today to be able to respond to one of those and to really base a whole episode around something that was brought in. So we would love to do that with your feedback as well. So please send that in, and we hope that we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you, and take care.